Hi,
Hello.
we're live.
I think so.
Hey, Jason, it's always great to hang out with you, and
Yeah.
we're gonna let folks trickle in for a little bit, right? I see the number going up, 20. Looking for that 21.
Running an auction here.
I'm gonna start sharing my screen. I hope.
I'm excited. This is fun. We have to make up work to hang out online.
Yeah, yeah.
Join us for next week's webinar when we drink scotch and talk about football.
What a game Monday night! Patriots versus Bills. Woo!
Oh, yeah, it's crazy.
Mac Jones with 2 of 2 complete passes. Patriots win, just running the ball down the field. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about a better way to monetize your podcast. Presented by, well, on my side of the fence, Castos, and on the other side of the fence, Jason, Paid Memberships Pro. Jason, any words of wisdom before we kick off?
No, man. I'm excited to listen to you and learn myself.
We shall see. All right, everybody, welcome to the webinar. If you are a returning webinar viewer from yesterday with my boss, Craig, then you know what to do. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, go ahead and drop them in the chat. Sam will field any of those questions. And if there's something really, really glaring out there, Jason will interrupt me to answer that question. So a better way to monetize your podcast. Now, this is an interesting, well, first of all, who am I? Matt Medeiros, Director of Podcaster Success. It's a fancy title. Craig ironed that out just for me. I still don't fully understand what it means a year into, well into a year over this. I help folks get their podcasts off the ground. Let's make them successful with their podcasts. Here at Castos, Podcast Hosting and Analytics, and I am a serial podcaster for just about 10 years now, doing a bunch of podcasts in and around the podcasting space, the WordPress space, and some local podcasts that I do here in my local area, just south of Boston, Massachusetts. Are you from Boston, Massachusetts, or South Coast? Let me know. Drop it in the comments. Here's my goal: to at least get you thinking about podcast monetization through sponsorship and members only content. When I sat back to create this presentation, I said it wouldn't be fair if we just did members only content or members only monetization, because I think largely what we'll find with any successful membership site podcast is going to come down to all of this marketing stuff that you do. I'd probably bet that a lot of you getting into members only podcast will probably have a public podcast, or at least branch out to that in the future, because it's going to be obviously a great way to drive traffic to your Paid Memberships Pro site, get people looking at your content, get them interested in that private podcast or members only podcast. So you're going to want both in the future. And maybe, just maybe, you want to monetize a public podcast. That's what I do. And we'll look at some examples. Saugus, Massachusetts, JC, welcome. All right. So a lot of this first segment of the presentation is a bit of a review of the industry, like where the industry wants us to go, the podcasting industry, sort of how they look at monetization versus creators, you and I, folks like you and I, creating content, creating digital products, selling access to a membership, et cetera, et cetera. What the industry says, unfortunately, of what we should make when we monetize a podcast. It's the ancient struggle of mass appeal versus valuing a niche craft. I'll dive into what that really means, but and what that really means for you as a creator, and what kind of dollars you might be able to command on either side of the fence, both public and free, public and private. So I'd love to hear if anyone is in the audience. Of course you are. Why is monetization important to you? Like, why are you here today? Why is monetizing a podcast important to you? Largely, what are your goals with monetization? I think a lot of people throw out the idea of selling sponsorships, selling ad spots, monetizing a show, maybe for the wrong reasons. So let me know what your goals are. What do your existing marketing efforts look like? That when you don't have to throw in just some thinking points here. What do your existing marketing efforts look like when you're thinking about monetizing a show and what that's going to be like? Well, what else are you doing across the board with marketing your content? And do you have an existing audience? I'd probably bet that most of you do here because you have because you're a paid memberships pro user. You're probably selling content already through your WordPress website and PMP. But what does that audience really look like? Largely, this will sort of help you turn the wheels on what you can charge for a podcast. And how much time do you have? The age-old question of how much time do you have? This is the number one question. Well, one of the top questions I get at Castos is, going to start a podcast, going to start a members-only podcast. And they ask, how many episodes should I publish a week, a month? And I'll ask, well, what do you think you're going to publish? And everyone, 98% of them say, I want to publish 4 times a month, once a week, just like, air quotes, every other podcaster out there. I say, great, that's fantastic. It's a fantastic goal. If you've never done podcasting before, hold on to your seat because it takes a lot of work like everything else. And you probably want to cut that time down in half and spend your other time promoting. And we'll talk about that later on in the slide deck. But how much time do you have to work on promoting this new podcast that you might launch, along with everything else that you're doing with your paid memberships pro site? Let me just take a look at this poll here because I wanted to see it. Not including membership site, which ways have you tried to monetize?
Yeah, it looks like 3/4 of responses are they haven't tried to monetize.
Great.
So.
Perfect. You're in the right place. So what are the challenges for creators? The landscape of podcast monetization to a degree. Now, let me just tell you about my background quickly, or my background in podcasting. I've not broken through the top 100 Apple Podcasts charts before, largely because the content that I create is very niche. WordPress, podcasting. There's not a huge audience for that compared to a reality TV show. Kevin Hart getting sponsored by Chase credit cards, multi-million-dollar deals to do podcasts on financial services and things like that. These are very large, publicly consumed pieces of content. And the way that I approach creating podcasts is finding the niche content and then maximizing the value there. And that's what we're going to look at. So as of today, as I pulled this little screenshot before, and I bet you it has even gone up at this point, over at podcastindex.org, there are 4.4 million podcasts being indexed at podcastindex.org. I'm just going to switch this chat so I can see the chat. Okay. 4.4 million podcasts that are out there. The world doesn't need another podcast. It needs a different podcast. And save this thought throughout the presentation. The world doesn't need another podcast. We don't need another interview podcast. 2 people talking about entrepreneurship, how they built their business, 45 minutes, record, upload to Castos. We need something different. It's okay to go after those topics, but critically think about how you can make that show different. How can you change up the format? How can you change up the content? How can you change up the guests or interview style? You make your show better. We'll talk about that. But save that thought throughout this presentation. We don't need another one. We need a different one. And that's what's going to help with your monetization efforts in the long run. So what exists now? What's the easiest paths to monetization for you, the podcast creator right now? These are the easiest paths, not the most lucrative, especially if you're a small creator like myself. So you can go into, competitors of Castos. You can go to other podcast hosting companies that have things called programmatic ads. Anchor is a fantastic example of this, or programmatic ads that become built in to your podcast hosting. So for, a very common one that everyone has probably seen before is like YouTube ads. If you upload to YouTube and you have ads on your show, on your videos, ads just pop up. Some brand goes and buys a spot for your video, and some brand shows up on your video. And I feel like largely creators in the YouTube world, we're kind of okay with that. We're like, oh man, it's fine. Like I'm getting some advertising dollars here. But podcasting is a little bit more intimate. It's a little bit more, creative. It's more of a conversation thing. And suddenly, you're on one of these programmatic ad networks and you're a health and fitness podcast, and Pringles shows up at the pre-roll of your podcast. And you're like, what the heck are you doing here, Pringles? You shouldn't be here, right? So those are some of the trade-offs. It's an easy way to get ad revenue, but you're also not in control of it. And you get pennies to the dollar. You can go the self-serve ad route and find your own advertisers on an ad inventory network like Podcorn. So podcorn.com, there's a handful of others where you can jump into that marketplace, if you will, and you can find places to you find other podcasters to advertise on, right? So this actually might be good for you if you're a membership site. You've got this niche content that you're selling or membership that you're selling. It might be an interesting place for you to go find opportunity there. But if you're looking to monetize your show there, just know that it's an ad inventory, and you'll see in a second some stats. You're not going to get top dollar there. You can negotiate. I don't know what the success rate is there, but you can negotiate with brands. But largely, it's always going to be for a smaller amount of money. And Podcorn takes a cut, 10%. And then there's the route of going to podcast networks. So you join a podcast network of other creators. A nice example of this might be something like the Podglomerate is one that isn't as giant as like a Wondery or something like that. But you're joining a podcast network of creators. The challenge there is, number one, kind of have to sell yourself into that network, right? You have to present your show. You have to get their attention, and they have to want your sort of genre of podcast to fit the framework of their network. The trade-offs there are, one, you're selling yourself to that space. You probably need a lot of downloads. And then also, who's the star of the network, right? It just becomes another challenge if you were just doing this all yourself. Who becomes the star? Who does the network support the most? What are the best shows? And then there's that sort of thing that happens that we're not really interested in. But these are the three easiest paths to monetization. We still need the numbers for these efforts to work. And I kind of mentioned all of this stuff. We're not in control with programmatic ads. Ad inventories need lots of downloads. So many creators will not see their podcast reaching of thousands of downloads per month, right? So many of us watching this show, watching this webinar, will probably not reach thousands of downloads with especially our first podcast. And if you do, congratulations, you're doing way better than most. And then on the podcast network side, who's really the star? Where do they spend their ad dollars promoting their network, and are you a piece of that, right, for the trade-off that you get? So here's an example from Podcorn. For less than 1,000 downloads a month, if that's you, if you have a podcast less than 1,000 downloads a month, this is right from their knowledge base documents. Question: how should I price myself if my show gets less than 1,000 downloads per episode? If your podcast gets an average of under 1,000 downloads per episode, then we recommend charging a flat rate per sponsorship. Fairly straightforward. So for pre-roll and mid-roll ads, Podcorn's estimation is $15 to $40 as a flat rate for most brands are comfortable with. Not a lot of money, right? Yeah. You're not making a lot of money if you're following, the laws of average and in large inventories, and a network that is getting other podcast creators that are getting thousands, if not tens of thousands of downloads, especially in the niche content space. Did you want to say something, Jason, to that?
Oh, I was going to say what you said. It just sounds low. It's not enough to kind of like recoup the cost for the podcast. And I'm curious, like, what Podcorn's motivation is for recommending such a low fee. I mean, maybe they're just trying to be conservative. But we're going to get to it, right? There's better options for
so
niche podcasts.
Yeah, so Podcorn, for greater than 1,000 downloads, they recommend that your pre-roll and mid-roll ads will be at 15 to 30 cost per thousand that most brands will run with. So even if you're getting, a few thousand downloads a month, it's still not tremendous money when you go through these ad networks. But hey, I've got some good news for you. I know I said there's 4.4 million podcasts in the directory. The good news is, again, if you look at the stats just below that 4.4 million number, competition isn't that high, because in the last 90 days, only 450,000 shows have been updated with new episodes. So it's not all doom and gloom, although it's still a pretty competitive market at the end of the day. So what is that better way to monetize your podcast? Subscription podcasts, of course, private podcasts. That's where the connection between Castos and Paid Memberships Pro and all of the efforts that you've already built, building out your membership site and building out your content, all sort of come together. Let's take a look at the your teams will love this. That is a title that I left in there by accident. Your teams will not love this. Your teams will absolutely not love this, these stats. So let's take a look at the two bigger players that came into this space. Now, Castos has, I feel, obviously, and biased, pioneered the private podcasting space now for a couple of years. And Apple's finally gotten into the game, which is great for us because it gets more exposure on the idea around subscription podcasts or private podcasts or members-only audio, whatever you want to call it. But Apple, as Apple does, takes a 30% cut of your revenue. They also, funnily enough, they also tax you $30 a year to be into the program. It's just like, man, do you even need that extra $30? So they take 30% of your sales. And the killer here is it only is accessible on Apple Podcasts. Not just Apple Podcast search, but the actual app. Like, you're not going to be able to, your members will never be able to listen to it, at least at the time of this recording, on their favorite podcasting apps, especially if they have Android devices. Spotify will take 5% in the year 2023. So if you join now, they're not taking a cut, but still only available on Spotify and through their Anchor app, right? So all of it is managed through their Anchor interface, but only available to listen to on Spotify. So there's no independence in any of this stuff. As a creator, as a small creator, yes, Pierre said Anchor is only available for U.S. residents right now. So you're also locking yourself into that U.S. territory only. So neither of these platforms will give you the flexibility to distribute everywhere while providing you to connect into other areas of your business. And this is the important part, is that, again, the power of WordPress and Paid Memberships Pro allows you as the creator to not just connect up your private podcast to Castos, but trigger all of the other things that make you successful in your creator business: marketing automation, e-commerce, other digital goods sold through Paid Memberships Pro, all this other stuff that really makes the wheel move. So, Castos, we don't take a fee from your sales. So Castos is just a flat monthly fee, starting on the left-hand side, which might be hard to see in just the slides. $19 a month, 100 private subscribers, and then it goes up from there. We don't do any revenue share. It's not like Apple taking 30% cut. You can host public and private podcasts here, which means you can distribute everywhere. It's still powered by the open RSS standard, not a closed app environment like Apple, like Spotify, like some other smaller competitors that are out there. So Castos starter plan, just back of the napkin math, because that's what I like. Castos starter plan, 100 subscribers a month or a year is $190 a year. That's the cost, $190 a year to get started with Castos. So if you charge even $49 a year for access to your public to your private podcast, that's $4,900 in revenue. Just straight back of the napkin math. Castos gets 190, you make 4,900. Subtract the 190. I'm not going to do math on the fly. But Castos doesn't take a cut of your earnings. Paid Memberships Pro, you own the content. You've worked probably for years creating the content, creating up your audience, creating up traffic to your site, blog content, downloadable content, forum-based content. You own it. It's yours. The flexibility of the payment is there with Paid Memberships Pro. Jason, I don't know off the top of my head how many merchants that you integrate with. Probably a lot, right? For your
Different gateways.
Different gateways.
Yeah, there's like 7 bundled in, and then there's a bunch that third-party plugins you can add, and then you can also integrate with WooCommerce, and just about every single gateway in the world integrates with WooCommerce.
Yeah. So you have that flexibility of payment, and then you get to obviously control the experience. The experience is the most powerful thing here as creators, is because it's not done through Apple, it's not done through Spotify, it's done through your website.
Yeah, that's hugely important. It's like if you are if you're calling them customers, like people that you're getting through a third-party service, and you don't really control the transaction, they're kind of not really your customer. Like if you don't have their email address and their name and other information about them, you can't, connect to them without using that third-party service, and they're not going to facilitate that. And I remember the folks at Basecamp were talking about when they launched Hey, and they wanted to charge outside of the Apple iTunes store. Like that was a big issue they had, is like if their customers get upset and they want a refund, they're going to yell at you on Twitter about charging their credit card and not processing the refund, but you're not actually physically able to process the refund. You just got to forward them to the billing department of whatever service you're using. So when you own your own platform, like those are real, subscribers and customers and human beings that you interact with, and you can get as much information as you need about them and plug them into every other service that you're using. It's a better way to run.
So as Jason illustrated, the experience is paramount. Paid Memberships Pro acts as, your front end of your website. You're directing traffic to your website with your brand. PMP acts as your funnel. You have the ability, which I obviously forgot to keep typing there in that paragraph. You have the ability to start funneling people in and trigger marketing efforts off of that email address that Jason mentioned. And then you publish to Castos, right? And you can publish directly to Castos through your WordPress website connected up to Paid Memberships Pro. This is actually the correct slide. That last one was left in there by accident. Paid Memberships Pro is the payment. Sell on Paid Memberships Pro, sell your course, your product, or your community access via Paid Memberships Pro, and send that transaction right to Castos, which delivers the private podcast for you. It's a pretty easy formula. Sell that access, and we take care of the private podcast infrastructure behind the scenes. How to achieve success with sponsorship going beyond the tools. So this is where we kind of cross over, where I'll talk a little bit about monetizing your public show, and then going into monetizing your private show, because I think it works for both camps. So go direct. Go direct to your source. Go direct to your sponsor or your advertiser or your partner. And in order to achieve that success, you have to value the content. You really have to sit back and say, the stuff I'm doing is great because nobody else is doing it. And remember when I said at the top of the show, nobody wants another of the same podcast. They want something different, right? And that's where you have to challenge yourself. Value what you're doing, value the craft, and reach out to somebody that can see the value in the content that you're creating. Marketing. Successful podcast goes beyond just the audio. You have to have a solid marketing plan. I think many of us know that are on this call. Direct sales. Skip the big box ad stores like the Podcorn. Again, it is easy. It's great to go in and just punch stuff in and find an advertiser, but you will not maximize the dollars for your monetization compared to the value that you provide. So go direct, find sponsors that value art in your audience. And partnerships. Monetize a podcast doesn't have to be just about your feed. This is the great thing about podcasting is there's no rules. The bad thing about podcasting is there's no rules, right? So it's hard to find the one thing that always works because it just doesn't really exist. It doesn't always have to be about that podcast that you create. I think what podcasting, especially a public podcast, does is elevate you as that authority in a particular topic. Quite literally, you become a voice for a particular topic, and then you could turn to a partner and say, hey, Jason, I'll do a 10-part or 8-part miniseries about the best membership creators in the world, and I'll tell the story of XYZ, and I'll just make this just for you, and we can say it's brought to you by Paid Memberships Pro, right? So it doesn't have to be,
We
I'm
should
going
do
to I'm going to advertise on
that.
Matt's podcast.
I think
Matt's going to make a little mini series specifically for Paid
yeah.
Memberships Pro.
Yeah, totally. I feel I'm on both sides of this with customers who have podcasts, but then also as a sponsor of podcasts. And it's amazing sometimes there's creators who are putting out really great content, and it's not thousands of downloads, but it's like maybe dozens or hundreds of downloads within, like you said, they're an authority in the space. And they're, in the WordPress space, like, I want to support these podcasts. I want to give them money. I want them to think I'm a nice guy and like me and keep me in mind next time news comes out about my products. It's kind of like there's other people like me that just like, they want to give you money. You just have to give them a way to do it. And so sometimes people are really hesitant to like set up sponsorship or ask, they're kind of timid about it. And it's like, you like, just get something out there. And actually, Paid Memberships Pro is an easy way, if you have a WordPress site already, to create membership levels for sponsors and use our directory plugin to create a directory of sponsors so they get listings on your website. And just asking for like that, the biggest thing, the technology is there and you can set it up, find videos how to do it, but just asking people for the sponsorship. And you do need to give them something, like I always think of, the NPR and WHYY, you get like a mug or an umbrella or something. And you're like, are people really, does that matter? It's like, there has to like a $5 mug for a $500, sponsorship or something like that. Like there's something like in human nature that like, I have to get something for my sponsorship. So you have to think about something, but sometimes people get really caught up. They're like, someone wants to give me $1,000. How do I give them $1,000 of value? And just like, no. The point is for you to keep making your podcast. Like that's the idea.
Yeah.
And you can always kind of tweak the numbers later.
Yeah.
So
100%.
it's big to push on this. Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. So again, as Jason illustrated, there's value in niche audiences. So an example would be exactly what Jason just talked about, the multi-billion-dollar WordPress industry. Let that sink in for a moment. The multi-billion-dollar WordPress industry hosts product companies like Jason's, services agencies, freelancers, all of these folks who kind of touch WordPress in a particular way. It's worth multi-billions of dollars, automaticwordpress.com, stuff like that. There's a tiny audience for content that analyzes the space, but few content outlets that brands can really leverage. So there are brands that are hungry for that kind of content, even though there's not so many people in that space. You're not doing tech reviews, you're not doing car reviews, you're not doing sports or general news. It's still a niche audience that has value in it because it's a big industry. And I'm sure there are dozens of other industries out there like that. How do we achieve success with subscriptions? So if we want to sell subscription podcasts, how can we be successful doing that? I think you have to, think outside of the box to a degree. So selling audio goes beyond just the podcast, as we were kind of hinting at. So you can sell exclusive audio with your private podcast. The most common method is to deliver an ad-free experience or a director's cut of your podcast. So if you are in that camp where you have a Paid Memberships Pro site and you have a public podcast and you do sponsor your public podcast, maybe one of the things you could do is offer that private feed, which doesn't have the ads in it, so people don't have to be skipping around. My God, have you heard of Tim Ferriss' podcast where literally the first 15 minutes is just ads? Have one that doesn't have ads, or provide some extra material, right? I know there's a whole bunch of podcasters out there that have bonus material with their guests, especially if it's an interview show, and reserve that for the folks that join your membership, right? So you can have those two different feeds. Courses for members: offer your courses membership access in audio form. At Castos, we're really big on what we call the step away experience. So if you can take the courses that you might have on your existing site, again, thinking outside of the box, if you're selling something that's a video and written course or material, can you bring that down into just an audio form? Like, can the person buying this get the same value if it's in audio form? And sort of say, hey, look, just take this on the go with you, right? This is, you don't have to be at the computer engaging with the content. Download it to your phone, get away from the desk, get that step away experience. I throw audiobooks in here because I think it's an unsung hero from all of this stuff. Replace audiobook with anything that might be audio, a story, a music album. It really doesn't have to be this real stuffy podcast that you're always selling. You can create an audiobook in an RSS feed and sell that through your Paid Memberships Pro site. And then another advantage that we found certainly over the course of the unfortunate pandemic is asynchronous communication. Provide raw conversation as a coach or a leader of an organization. We have customers that sell, well, what I'll call high profile coaching at high dollars. So they don't have a lot of customers, but they're selling it for thousands of dollars. They have feeds that go just direct to their customer, right? So I sell Jason a coaching course for a few $1,000. He gets us just a feed directly to him that I can send him stuff to. So
I think
very powerful.
There was I could talk on that last slide forever, but there was someone in the chat who's doing coaching. And so on that last point, you know, it's a great funnel of a public podcast where you talk about the most important things, you know, what you're a thought leader on, what everyone should know, put the word out. That gathers people into it. And then you can sell kind of like cohorts of courses or membership that is not one-on-one personal, but it adds more privacy. You know, maybe it's like once a week you have, you know, a meetup just for the folks who are paying you for your subscription. And then you sell high value one-on-one coaching. And if the price point is like free for your public podcast, maybe, you know, whatever it is, $30 a month for your membership, and then like $1,000 a month for $3,000 a month for your coaching, there's like a real natural, you know, selling your $3,000 a month coaching to the people who are already members is kind of an easier sell. Yeah.
Right. Yep. It's not always about forking over gobs of cash, though. We don't always need a transaction to build relationships. That's another reason why I really like audio. I really like podcasting, is because with what you have now. So if you are using Paid Memberships Pro now and you have a membership or community or coaching courses, stuff like that, you can simply add value with the audio feeds. You can use a private podcast as a lead gen source. So private podcasts at Castos are connected to emails. So it's a great marketing opportunity. So you can use it as like a free course. It's very intimate. It's a really nice experience for, you know, the potential customer of yours. And because we trigger based off of an email, now you can fire off in many different directions, right? That free lead gen comes in from a free piece of content on your Paid Memberships Pro site. It goes to Castos. You get the email. And then if you want to trigger other things to happen in your marketing stack, it's a great way to get that customer into your system. Onboarding. Spice up the value of your existing membership with welcoming audio series. So if you have a long-standing membership or some complex content course, like my brother is a Paid Memberships Pro customer and a Castos customer. He has, he's doing trading, stocks, all this stuff, analysis. There's just a lot of things that people have to look at on his website. He offers an onboarding series. People can listen to 10 minutes, little bite-sized steps on what you should expect out of the course. So you're adding value there. You're solving an onboarding problem. Open mic. This is something that I'm a fan of, is you get to leverage your members only podcast to give the floor to your members, right? Let them really shine. So if you're looking for a way to, again, add value to your members, get them heard, get them chatting with each other, raise engagement, make a private podcast just for your members. Of course, you probably want to screen the content, but if they send you episodes or content, you can publish it and they feel like literally they're getting heard because it's through a private podcast. Great ways to engage. So look, at the end of the day, create the best show today and get better tomorrow. So on the note of selling sponsorships to a public podcast, you must strive to build the best show you can while pushing yourself to be better with each episode. That's the biggest challenge. People always ask me, how do they monetize their show? And they're looking for just the blueprint on how to monetize the show, but it's about the content. It's about the effort that you put in. And it's about being different than just another podcast. Don't be discouraged when you can't sell advertisements when you're simply recording your Zoom calls and uploading it to your Castos feed. You have to be better. On selling members only audio, think outside of the box and deliver value with audio. Challenge yourself to think about how you can add value through the intimacy of audio, and you don't have to overcomplicate it. So on the flip side, with private audio, sometimes just the raw recordings are way more valuable than a highly produced, over-engineered public podcast that you're using to scoop up the largest audience to your brand. Sometimes people just want that real close connection. Jason picks up his phone, he literally records a private podcast with his iPhone, and he shoots it off to the Castos private feed. And that's what people are really paying for, that off the cuff realness, rawness of audio on the private side.
Yeah, that's a good point. So like your private podcast, you might think since folks are paying for this, it needs to be more produced, it needs to be longer, it needs to be better. But in reality, the people who are paying for your podcast, if you also have a public podcast, if they're paying for the private podcast, like they're the true fans and they're willing to sit through, like suboptimal audio, suboptimal editing, they just want more. So give them more. And they probably would rather have, 2 rough podcasts from you than one more finished one. So, and yeah, that's another thing people get held up on. Push through that.
If you want to demo what the private podcast experience is like, you can sign up at academy.castos.com/private podcast. Drop your email in. It'll send you a link to the Castos mobile app. That's academy.castos.com/private podcast. And it'll send you access to the Castos mobile app, which is available on Apple and Google Play. And that will be a great way for you to experience what you would be sending your customers when they get access to a private feed through Paid Memberships Pro and the Castos connection. The app is available on all plans. So for $19 a month, you can sell those 100 private podcasts, as many private podcasts as you want, but up to 100 subscribers. And because if I don't get this channel to 1,000 subscribers by the end of January, Craig said he's going to fire me. So please, youtube.com/Castos, smash that like button. That's where you'll get all of the updates from me.
People should go there. I was doing a little bit of research for coming on here, and I was surprised at how much content you already had produced and published already out on that YouTube. I was like, oh, they already got a video about this. They got a video about this other thing too. I was like, oh, we need to start linking to these.
Yeah.
So there's some amazing content there. Everyone go over there and subscribe.
That's what I have. Happy to answer any questions from anyone in the audience.
Man, I'm excited to think more about the onboarding podcast. I'll have to check out what your brother did there and some other examples of that.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's audio, and it's access, right? And through email, you can trigger those things to happen, and it's just a better onboarding experience for your users.
I see a couple questions. I think Patrick has gotten help through the chat, but maybe you can put it on audio, video too, for how. What do you see? Answer live. He has 150 plus podcast episodes on Libsyn, and so how easy is it to migrate those to Castos? Oh, I pushed the wrong button there.
We went to Kim. All right, hold on. Let me read because this one just popped up. Apologies.
I don't know how to put that one back.
Apologies if this is covered, but what analytics are available for private podcasts, progress, listens, follows, who listens, etc.? This is a fantastic question. So right now we're leveraging the same analytics that we report against our public podcasts for a few reasons, right? So one is privacy and data and stuff like that. 2, because it's still powered by the open RSS standard, because we give our Castos customers the option when you sell a private podcast, even if it's connected to Paid Memberships Pro, we still give you the option to deliver a standard RSS feed in an email so that your users can load it up in any podcast app to listen to. And then we give you the option to listen to it just in the Castos mobile app. You can turn either of them on or off at any point. But the challenge there is it's hard to track listens and duration. In fact, it's quite impossible to track those durations through the RSS standard. It's also the most open. We will be able to track it in the mobile app. So that's just, the crux of things that we're at right now. We will have that data available, and it will just only be reported through the Castos app.
Yeah, podcasting metrics are tough to get.
Right.
I don't know if I accidentally closed off Patrick's question about migrating episodes from Libsyn to Castos if they
Yeah.
install Seriously Simple and you start using Castos?
Yeah, that's it's really easy. It pulls down our migration process, pulls down the episodes, puts them in Castos or puts them on your WordPress website, wherever you're migrating to. And that all largely just runs in the background. And it's just an exercise of either if you're maintaining the RSS feed from Libsyn or not. I don't know if they give you that option, but they should allow you to redirect it for some time to the new Castos feed. So you can do that. It's fairly straightforward.
And then someone wants to know what mic you're using. Or not mic, what camera you're using.
Can someone tell us what camera Matt is using? This is a Sony A7 III.
Nice.
I can pull this in, right? This one. Oh, there it is.
This is the next question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How easy is it in this system to have public and free podcasts and then have an extended version that is for private subscribers? Extended version for private. Oh, I see. So how do you have to? So you can, on Castos, you can host as many individual podcasts as you want. The limitation of plans are total download count per month and private subscribers per month. For example, the starter plan, you can go up to 25,000 downloads per month on your public podcast and up to 100 private subscribers on the private podcast. But you can create as many public shows and as many private shows as you want, as long as they don't surpass those thresholds. And that goes $19 a month, $49 a month, $99 a month. And generally you're increasing your own revenue as you're selling private or monetization through your public podcast as you move up the chain.
Nice. Yeah, it's just two different podcasts, and one has the extended version.
Yep.
One thing I wanted to mention about advertising, and this has like been and having like an ads-free private podcast. This is something I've been looking into more recently. I think some people feel that if they have like an ad-free podcast, that's going to somehow hinder like the advertising that they're doing. So like if everyone's using my ad-free podcast, I'm not going to sell ads, which would be like, one, if you really think through the math, like what a great problem to have that, all of your listeners, moved over to your paid podcast. You don't need the ads anymore. But in reality, I don't think it's a one or the other situation. What I've seen in so many cases is like podcasts and also other formats is folks introduce an ad-free version of a product and then they double the number of ads that they're serving, through the product. Because there's an easy out for people who are frustrated by the ads. They can just pay to get rid of them. And so like the one example I look into is like YouTube in their quarterly earnings report, they released like YouTube premium numbers keep going up, increasing 50%, year over year. But YouTube ads are increasing 50% year over year as well at the same time. So it's not like a one or the other kind of situation. It works together really nicely.
I'm going to answer what you just said.
Yeah, go ahead.
Rolled into this question from Jonathan, because I think it kind of plays well together nicely.
Mm-hmm.
So on the question of I'm selling advertisements and people, I'm also allowing my members to buy an ad-free experience. And then Jonathan asks, sponsors are always looking for this ROI in podcasting, and how do we get over this kind of thing where we're providing value to them and ROI to them and all this stuff. So it's important for you, as a creator. A lot of us don't have the luxury of being a celebrity or getting really high download count shows. At Castos, there are folks that are, doing tens of thousands of downloads a month, and they still can't command the kind of dollars a celebrity would, or, some, big journalist name or producer that goes to sort of a podcast network. So it's very important for us as small creators to, when we're selling advertisements or sponsorships, you probably want to throw the word advertisements out and sell sponsorships or partnerships to the folks that really want you to continue to create the content. It takes some rolling up of the sleeves and some sales experience, but you really want people to sponsor the show so that the show continues to exist, right? You don't want it to be this experience where the advertiser just, I want, X amount of sales per month through this, or X amount of clicks. It's just not going to happen for small creators in a small podcasting space. So you have to sell them on the value of yourself as a creator and the content. And that way there's no dilemma of them looking at you saying, where's my ROI? But also, hey, I see you're selling membership at the same time that has an ad-free experience. And that's where you might say, to respect the sponsors, well, maybe I'm not going to sell an ad-free experience if they've bought into me as a creator creating this content, because I need to be fair. I need to let the world know that these folks support this content. So you don't make these jarring advertisements, number one, or ad reads. But number two, maybe you think of some other value to sell in a private podcast setting.
That's good advice. I think it's like maybe those sponsors aren't a good fit if they're so focused on the ROI. Correct. And you don't want to shy away from it, but especially on the lower end. If you're big enough and you're kind of confident in your ability to send traffic, you can take on some of the risk and say, I'll take your ad for free, and then you'll see, and then pay me afterwards. I've been in that spot too with like tracking. You're sending a lot of traffic to someone and they're not really giving you the conversion data, but they are, they're not sharing data with you, but you want to share with them. And this is like getting into the weeds and maybe it's technical, so you might need help with it. And that's one of the beauties of running on WordPress is if you control WordPress, you can get flexible with the technology you're using. But a couple quick tips, if you really like, we're like, I want this sponsor and I'm going to try. One is like, if you can set up a redirect on your site. So instead of giving their website URL in your ad read a URL that's on your site that you control, and then you can track at least how many times people got redirected over there. So they'll say like, hey, there's only been 2 sales. And you'll say, well, there's been 20,000 visits. So how comes your landing page isn't converting?
Yeah.
And then the other thing is ask them if they have an affiliate program for other, like they might have a custom deal with you, like just send traffic. But if they're using an affiliate software or platform of some sort, because if they are, they're like, hey, set me up as an affiliate. And a lot of times those affiliate programs share some of the data. And so those are 2 things you could look into. It's not perfect. And I would definitely like take Matt's advice first of thinking about what kinds of sponsors you want to get.
Yeah. Let's see. Yep. I'll take that. Kim asks, what model do you see more often for a creator with multiple private podcasts, individually priced, individual signups, or as a package? It's a great question. I don't have too much data on creators that have multiple private shows. What I have seen, and what's like really effective for them, but what I have seen is that sort of freemium jump to offering, like you can have a coupon, like for example, like a coupon code, right? So, hey, these 3 shows, these 3 courses, let's say, or instructions or communities, they price them individually, and then they offer one of them for free through a coupon code. And it's sort of like that freemium model. So jump into the free stuff so you can kind of experience what it's going to be like. And then once they hook you there on the free audio, well, naturally you're going to progress up to one of these other paid channels. So I've seen it. Yeah. I've seen folks do that, and the sort of freemium approach to it. So I don't have full data on, which one works best. I haven't seen somebody wrap it all up into a package though, but it's a good idea. Jumping up.
Yeah. I think if you have like a huge backlog catalog, and especially if they're like seasonal or topical, it could be good to sell them individually. I think people would be worried, like, instead of selling like a monthly fee and you're like, oh, I paid $5 for the first month and then I downloaded everything or listened to everything in 1 month and then quit. I think people are worried about that, and they're probably too worried. But there's some truth to that, like that the value is different and kind of tied to the seasons and the individual series, and so kind of you can put different prices on things, and that's something you could do through Paid Memberships Pro with different membership levels, or or add-on packages to kind of sell one-time fees for a membership level, link that to a private podcast if you have kind of a backlog that is organized that way.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I don't see any other questions.
Hey, I had a couple things
Yeah.
that maybe that came up. One is some of the add-ons that Paid Memberships Pro has that like work particularly well for podcasts, because some of those other advertising models, I mentioned the directory add-on. So if you sell sponsorships through Paid Memberships Pro, you can give those sponsors access to your private feeds as if they had paid, for a membership as well. And then you also can put them in a directory of sponsors to kind of promote them. We also have like a variable pricing plugin that's popular with podcasts, where that's almost similar to like a Patreon model, where it's like pay what you want. So you can set a minimum and a maximum or suggested levels, and have people, some people only pay $5, but some, might pay more. Like, why not give them the opportunity to pay more? And we also have a donation add-on, which is similar to you can add a donation at checkout, or have a separate donation page running. You already have Paid Memberships Pro set up and integrated with your gateway. You don't need to install a different donation plugin to accept donations. You can accept donations that way too. So those are three of the add-ons that if you're running a podcast using Paid Memberships Pro, you might want to look into using. Yeah, those are good. And then I just I don't know, this doesn't have to be the final thought, but I remember like a few years ago, going to Podcast Movement, and my goal going to that conference was like, I'm going to talk to podcasters and talk to them about monetization, and see if we should build a product where people could charge for access to their podcast or backlog and stuff. And man, when I was there, the answer was no. Like, they were like, oh no, I would never do that. I'm going to sell courses. Everyone's selling courses or other content or ads and sponsorships. So I kind of was like, and I met Craig at that conference of Castos, and we were talking about like the technology to combine like our two services. And I was like, doesn't really seem like there's demand there. And it's not always true that like, if you build it, they will come. But I think in this case, it's one of those things where people they didn't know what they wanted. It sounded more like harder to do this than maybe like it sounded like something that they didn't want to get into. But now that the technology is tight and Castos makes it as easy as possible to set up a private podcast, and Paid Memberships Pro is an easy way to add membership levels to your WordPress site. Like, I think I hear more excitement when I'm talking to folks about using this technology. So I think it's pretty cool that you guys did the work to do the integration, and we're promoting this, and I'm excited that folks are finding value in it and getting use out of it.
Yeah, I mean, think about just how much more exposed folks have come to podcasts, even compared to back then. It's just like the rise of WordPress, right? Keeps on growing, and nobody knew about WordPress even 5-8 years ago, right? When I say nobody, like the world really didn't know about it, and it was as large as it is. Podcasting becoming a lot more promoted, because it's just that you take a step back again and you take a look at the media landscape and the content landscape, and with the dominance of YouTube and video, it's like all these other players are looking for ways. When I say players, I mean big companies: Apple, Spotify, Google, etc., Amazon, looking for ways to break into attention. Right? How do we get people's attention? Podcasting. Netflix owns the TV experience, maybe Amazon now, YouTube video. So everyone's looking to now break into another segment, which is great for podcasting and for us creators, because now more people understand what a podcast is. When I launched my local podcast 3 years ago, I mean, people in my local community are like, what the hell's a podcast? People still say that today, right? Like, what is a podcast?
Yeah.
And I think that now that terminology is getting a lot more broadly adopted, thanks to all of the money that's being poured into it from, these larger players.
Yeah. There's another question from Pierre, who asks, is there a way to just buy the private subscribers at Castos? And I'm not sure if he means just buy Castos and not Paid Memberships Pro. If that's the question, Paid Memberships Pro is free, open source and free. It's available in the WordPress.org repository. We do have paid plans that give you access to other things, but the software itself is free. But if you're asking, I'll let you answer, Matt, if maybe he means just the private subscribers functionality of Castos and not some of the other features like distribution and things.
Yeah.
Is that possible?
So you can't buy just private podcasts. You have to, the account comes with both functionalities, public and private. But Pierre might also mean, can you buy more private subscribers above the plans? And you can buy chunks of 500.
Okay.
Yep.
So once you get over the 100 subscribers on the one level,
yeah,
you buy chunks of subscribers 500 at a time. Makes sense.
Yep. And if you have more than that, sales can give you a custom quote.
I don't know why my camera broke. Sorry about that.
It's all right. All right. Well, I think just shy of an hour. Pretty good.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate everybody's time joining the webinar. Again, if you have any questions, hello@castos.com. Sam has been jumping in and putting the links in. If you want to experience the private podcast, academy.castos.com/private podcast. If you want to start your membership site on WordPress, because I was trying to find my camera. If you want to start a membership site on WordPress, Paid Memberships Pro, it's the best way to do it. Best way to start selling your private podcast on WordPress. Have I missed anything else, Jason?
No, that's good. Can I clip that last part and throw it on our homepage?
You can.
We'll work that out.
Cool.
This has been great. I'm excited. This was good, and I'm excited for the folks who watch now and folks who are watching the VOD that we're going to keep sharing this. People who want to monetize their podcasts.
Cool. All right, everybody. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks.